There was something I witnessed a few years ago that I don't really understand, and that never really made any sense or added up for me. I will try and explain it as quickly as I can without bogging it down with details that I know you don't really care about. I was on a shift that night, and I was one of the first responders on the scene. We got reports that a black SUV had been driving down the interstate way above the speed limit and had just all of a sudden veered off the path, but that there didn't seem to be any issues with the vehicle. Apparently, the SUV seemingly swerved for no reason at a section of concrete barriers that were blocking the way down some kind of grass verge or hill. Now, this could be totally and completely wrong, but on that night, I shit you not, the guy who called into the police mentioned that he had been passed by this car maybe 20 or 30 minutes prior. He said that when this car passed him, it didn't look like there was anyone in the driver's seat. In fact, he said it didn't look like there was anyone in the car at all, which didn't make any sense whatsoever. He said he only really took notice because he could see in his rearview mirror that this guy was way up his ass on the road, and then once he got super close, he just overtook him at like a dangerous speed. But again, this did not make any sense. Sure, I know things like Tesla autopilot and shit are decently common and well tested now, but when this happened, quite a few years ago, they were certainly in their infancy and had not undergone all of their rigorous testing. At least, not as far as I was aware, unless I'm mistaken. Plus, you still need to be present in the car and turn your key to activate the autopilot, and it's not like you could just jump out of the car while driving like you're playing GTA or something. That would be ridiculous and most likely end in your death. We would have found a body on the road on the way there. I was told this information, but it was stressed to me that the caller was likely mistaken since it was late at night and he was likely tired, maybe driving home from work. Like I said, I arrived to the scene before anyone else did. It's my job as an officer to secure the scene, make sure it's closed off, and so that no idiots can cause a bigger wreck or interfere with the site of the crash, and just generally assess the situation and pass on this vital information to other officers on their way, and EMTs too. I want to clarify that I was working solo at that point and did not have a partner. I don't know exactly how it works in other states, if working with a partner on patrol is mandatory, but it allows less officers to cover more area to reduce spend on wages and such. This is especially crucial during night shifts, when we already have staff shortages. So, I got to the area, and let me tell you, it was an absolute mess. I don't know exactly how, but this SUV had smashed through 2 or 3 barriers head-on before trying to swerve to the right through another one, and it ended up toppling and rolling a decent distance down this verge or whatever. Considering how messed up the road was, and how it was completely littered with pieces of the fender, and other bits of metal here and there too, the SUV was not too badly damaged. I very quickly cordoned off the area, spoke to a few people on the scene to get their witness testimony, reported some information to my colleagues, and then used my own patrol car in order to block off more of the area until backup arrived. After that, I was given permission to proceed down towards the vehicle and assess the scene. The first thing I did was put my hand on the side of the car, near the rear, and it absolutely scorched me. I don't know exactly what happened, but the metal was so hot it could probably flash fry an egg in 2 seconds flat. I felt my hand throbbing and aching for the whole time afterwards, and I had a superficial burn on my palm that I had to get treated by medics later. There were scratches all down the sides of the car, like someone had taken an iron girder, pierced the metal body, and then just dragged it along. Surprisingly, the windshield was entirely intact, as were the rest of the windows. The windows were all also entirely blacked out, aside from the front windshield. The front windshield was the only window that you could see through. The car also had no plates. I was not able to pull up any information about the car at the time from what little we had to go on. It was like a ghost car. Even afterwards, my supervisor mentioned that it was not registered in any system. I'm talking no tax, no insurance, no purchase history, nothing at all. And it wasn't like it was a brand new car either and had just been brought stock out of the shop. It was at least 3 to 5 years old at that time. I checked that car, and there was no one in the front seats or in the back seats. The car was still locked shut, which required me to break the windows in order to check if anyone was injured or stuck in there and needed help. Well, I got quite a shock when I tried to do that. I had a crowbar in the back of my vehicle and no dice. I used full force on this window and there was not even a crack when I struck it. I was confused, and so I wasn't really sure what to do. I reported this in to my superiors. I double-checked all of the car locks. It turns out that the right side passenger door was slightly off of its hinges, likely from the force of the crash and the impact, and so I could just open it up. That was really lucky for me. Otherwise, I would have had no way to open the damn thing. There was no one inside of there at all. Not a single trace of anyone even stepping foot in that car. There were no keys in the ignition, and if it did have some kind of autopiloting system, I sure as hell did not know how to work it. The interior of the car was also incredibly hot, and the windows were hot to the touch. I noticed that in the back seats, there was a ton of electrical wiring that just looked really out of place and like it was exposed for no reason at all. The wires seemed to run from some kind of battery type thing that was in the back seat. Not just one, multiple massive batteries, and these wires then ran into the trunk of the vehicle and then disappeared. I don't really know much about wiring to tell you what was going on. Upon realizing about these wires though, I noticed something else. What looked like tiny specks of blood in the back seat, just ever so faint. Just a couple of drops that were stained into the seats and could not be wiped away. I knew this, that someone had tried to get rid of them, because the seats still smelled pretty strongly of bleach if you got close enough. This was enough for my superiors to give me the go-ahead to crack open the trunk of the car, and so I did. I tried to take a crowbar to the damn thing, but it seemed like no matter how much force I put into it, I could not open it up. It felt like there was something inside with some kind of weight, some kind of mechanism just holding it down, holding it in place. And that is when something insane happened. I don't know how. It should not have been possible at all, but the car engine turned back on. There was no mistaking it for anything else. I was wondering what the hell was going on, and I radioed this in myself. Luckily for me, there were other officers pulling up to the scene now, as well as an ambulance, and the officers rushed down to help me. I ran to the front of the car to see if there was any way I could deactivate the thing, but I could not see any. They were asking me what was going on, and I was just stood there like a dumbass, just shouting, "It turned on by itself." Just before I did this, by the way, and the officers got there, and I ran away from the trunk, I actually heard something coming from the trunk. It was like some kind of mechanical whirring and something being powered on. I thought I maybe heard a voice too, the sound of a woman, maybe. This freaked me the hell out, and that's why I was so damn panicked about the car turning itself on. We could not turn it off, but the other officers helped me pry the damn trunk open. It took all of us, it took all of our strength. I told them that I heard someone in there, and they just told me that I was hearing things. But none of us at all expected what we saw when we ripped open the trunk of that SUV. The second that we did so, there was just smoke piling out of the thing, and it smelled horrible. It smelled like someone had overcooked meat at a barbecue. Once all of the smoke dissipated though, I could see that there was someone inside of there. It was a boy. I would estimate he was anywhere from 16 to 18 years old, from what I could remember. He was just curled up in a ball and was barely even breathing. His breathing was incredibly shallow, and he would not even respond when I tried to ask him his name and what had happened to him, if he was okay, etc. He just breathed heavily, wheezing, and that's it. He was just squished inside the trunk. There were more wires leading into the trunk, but I never got a chance to figure out what they were leading to. Whatever it was must have been hidden under something in the trunk, because I could not see anything at all apart from the boy. In fairness though, I was more concerned with his health at the time than figuring out the mystery of some stupid wires. It was a good thing that medical professionals were already there, because I would have been at a complete loss as to what to do. This boy had burns all over his body. I could see where bits of his skin had been scorched and sizzled and were now starting to peel. They were not consistent all over his body though. Most of them were around his chest area. He was shirtless in case I did not mention, but he had some along his arms and along his face too. He was visibly sweating and looked to be struggling to breathe, but one touch of his skin and I could feel that he was absolutely ice cold to the touch. It didn't make a lick of sense. And the boy wouldn't even open his eyes too. He tried at one point, but it's like he couldn't. It's like every time he did, he kind of winced in pain and shut them back closed, like something was making his eyes sting and it was just instinctual. I did not waste any time cutting his metal restraints so that the EMTs could hoist him out of there and treat him properly. He had marks around his wrists and ankles, suggesting he'd been tied up for a long time before he ever got put in the back of that vehicle. He obviously had some cuts and bruises from the crash too. I radioed over some more important information to my superiors, filled in my colleagues who were present at the scene, just telling them all of the events leading up to them arriving there. Then I got a chance to have another once-over of that SUV. I checked out those windows again, since I was incredibly interested. When I took a closer look, I was able to spot that the glass was actually much thicker than regular glass used in car windows and windshields. It must have been an inch or two thick, when regular car glass is nowhere near that thickness. Bulletproof glass starts at around quarters of an inch thick. This car had bulletproof fucking glass in it. It wasn't the only way you can tell. Bulletproof glass is made from thermoplastic and does this thing called ghosting. I don't know if you've heard of it, but if you look at the glass from an extreme angle, which I did, you can actually see multiple reflections of a light source because of the multi-layer of glass and composite. To put it in simple terms so that you understand, I knew for sure that this car had bulletproof glass. Right after this is where the next fucky part happens. A lot of officers all show up at once. I'm talking like 3 or 4 entire cars of them, as well as one unmarked car. Instantly, they are all swarming the scene, and they start bossing me around like they are calling the shots. Just shooing me away from the crash site and blocking it with their vehicles, telling me I have orders to do X, Y, and Z. And rightfully I told them to fuck off and that they were not my boss. Anyway, let's just say that my defiance did not last long after a radio call and a stern word from one of the guys in that unmarked car who was in plain clothes. One of the officers who showed up, who was in uniform, insisted that he go with the boy in the back of the ambulance, making all sorts of excuses. In fact, 2 of them muscled their way inside. The guy in plain clothes did not have much patience at all. He was just losing his absolute shit. He was practically blaming me for the crash and the scene when it was nothing to do with me. It was just ridiculous. He was clearly on some kind of a power trip. It had to be the oddest behavior I've ever seen in my life. Even the biggest narcissist in the force I had ever seen had never tried to act like this. Anyway, that road got blocked off for quite a while, and I was later sent elsewhere. I have no idea at all what happened to the vehicle or what came of the case. Like I said, the car did not show up in any system, as far as I knew anyway. Last thing I heard, that boy actually passed away en route to the hospital. I was told that he died from exposure and finally succumbed to his wounds. I don't know what it is about everything, but I just don't buy it. Call me a crazy conspiracist or whatever, but something about that night just did not add up for me. Anyway, that's about all I can tell you. I'm sorry that there was not much to go on or any proper happenings. I just thought it was odd and hoped I could possibly get people to weigh in with their thoughts. I mean, heck, I would kill for some real answers. Alright, here goes. A bit of background of who I am and what I do for a living. This will give a bit of context on how I've come across these reports. For the last 15 years, I've been employed as a licensed psychologist in Virginia. The firm that I work with takes subcontracted work from the federal government. The purpose of this work is to give psychological evaluations and reports on cases that the state does not want to be subject to various oversight agencies. If there is an instance where the feds need an interview and analysis done quickly and discreetly, then we are hired to do this. The pay is really good, and the job has allowed me to travel all over the country. But with all of that exposition out of the way, it's time to move on to the story. So, this was an area in the 912 area code of Georgia. It was an industrial area used mainly for the manufacturing of chemicals. For about 3 weeks, the nighttime security has been reporting to their higher-ups about sounds in the woods surrounding the area. Wildlife in the vicinity is not uncommon, but what is unnerving the guards is the volume that the sounds are being made at. They are reporting rustling in the woods like a truck is moving through it, followed by what can only be described as a massive fan oscillating. The reports continue for a few more days, but finally, the latest claims make the nearby chemical plant take some action. The security detail reports about a very musky odor coming from the woods in the direction of the sounds, followed by a fog of white vapor rising from the ground. Fearing some kind of a chemical leak from the underground pipes, they call in a state inspector. The idea was for the state inspector to supervise the plant's hired inspector to get an investigation without any heresy between the company and the government. They go into the woods to do their inspection. 2 days later, I am arriving in the area after a flight. My purpose was to interview the state inspector. I was to find out for the feds and the EPA why there was 1 dead man and 3 others severely injured. I was not there to solve a death, but rather to interview a state employee to register their state of mind. I arrive at a local hospital in the same city as the industrial area. I call my contact, and they come down to the parking lot to greet me. I am ushered into the inspector's hospital room by 2 police officers. Inside of it, I see a man of Middle Eastern ethnicity. He looks to be in his late 40s. His face is all swollen up, like he has had an allergic reaction. There are yellow welts all over his face and neck, as well as his arms and his hands. He is wearing an oxygen mask. The man has clearly been through a lot of shit. I sit by him and begin to get to work, introducing myself and beginning to make a dialogue between him and myself. He is hesitant to talk at first, but after an hour or so, we are able to get down to the matter at hand. He tells me that initially, he and the other inspector did a cursory look into the areas where the wounds, smells, and vapors were coming from. They found a curious sticky residue on the foliage and tree bark. The ground had been disturbed with what looked like drag marks dotting between the trees. Only, these markings would have had to have been made by something the size of a small car. They could see where the nearby trees had been leaned over, like a tractor had just pushed into them. Hearing this, I asked this man why the company had not alerted the police. If there were signs of unauthorized activity, then law enforcement should be made aware, especially around dangerous chemicals. The man in his hospital bed chuckled and then coughed. I asked them the same question, but as far as they knew, nothing was out of the ordinary, aside from the reports of sounds and movement in the woods by trigger-happy night guards. I continued on my interview with him. He explained that later in the night, they were going to go into the woods with a group of security to see what the source was of all the commotion. Night fell, and the 2 inspectors, accompanied by 3 security officers, made their way into the woods when the sounds began. He said that they walked closer and closer past the pine trees towards the noise. As they did, they could make out what sounded like something large being dragged on the ground. They then heard slurping sounds and a slight buzz. The guards got nervous and upholstered their guns. The 5 men made their way closer and closer. As the man was telling me his story, his heart monitor actually began to increase in its beeps. His face made a twisted sneer of disgust as he recalled to me the smell they were engulfed in as they were about halfway from the epicenter of the noise. He said it was a vile combination of rotten eggs, burning tires, and decaying deer. It was at that point that they began to see the white vapor on the ground. Eventually, they made their way to be almost on top of the sound. The man took a deep breath and said, "That's when the shooting started." One of the guards saw it first and began to unload into a black mass right in front of the group. There was a loud shriek like nails on a chalkboard and the sound of a vuvuzela. The man motioned with his hand and said that he shined his flashlight onto the mass. He went quiet for a few moments, but slowly he told me what he saw. It was what he described as a cross between a wasp at the front, but in the back was like a slug. It was about 5 meters in length and 2 meters high. It began to move towards them at an astonishing pace. It released the foul-smelling white vapor from holes in its body every single time it moved. There was barely any time to act as the creature swiped at the group with its insectoid legs and knocked all of them down. The man looked down and told me that that was the last thing that he remembered. We finished our interview from there, and I left him to himself. The report was handed over to my contact, and I left it to him from there. The industrial area was closed for 18 months for renovations. The woods around the area was bulldozed. I am unaware at what point during the encounter did the other inspector die. 3 of my colleagues interviewed the other witnesses. Officially, the death and the injuries are because of an animal attack. So I was around 24 years old at the time that this happened to me. I have a father who had been a severe alcoholic. I'm talking severe. Even attempted to kill my mother on one occasion. He lives in a village just next door to me. One day, I'm just out in the nature reserve. It's pretty much my second home at that point. Now, for the following part, I will state this. I am not a 100% believer of ghostly spirits and whatnot. I'm more of a skeptic to be honest, but I digress. Usually, this place brings me feelings of relaxation and peace, but this day was different. Suddenly, I get this feeling of anxiety and I am being watched feeling. I tried to shake it off. I am a pretty lonely person to be honest, and this was a forest. I'd react poorly to any kind of kid or person looking at me. I am on the final dirt path to the familiar turn gates. I see him, it, or whatever this thing was. I honestly don't know how to describe this thing, but he was humanoid. This thing had what looked like a really heavy yellow trench coat and some sort of a hat tipped just a little bit downwards, covering his face. We both stared at each other just for a few seconds. Suddenly, his arm jerks forward. Snaps forward. It was not smoothed into the position like a regular person would. He points at me. At this point, I thought I was gonna get stabbed and mugged by this person. I am scared out of my mind, so I just shut down. I just freeze up and hold my eyes closed tight. I am awaiting the fist or knife or whatever to hit me or be plunged into my body, which never actually came. I open up my eyes. He is gone. The shrubbery was not even disturbed. There was no footsteps leading away. I did not even hear the guy. I was way too scared to notice those facts at the time. I only remembered in retrospect. I just ran home. I got home at about 2 p.m. An hour passes by. I'm still a bit shaken up by the encounter with that thing. I'm trying to come up with reasons why there were no sounds of him going off, no footprints or disrupted shrubbery. I hear a car pulling up the gravel path outside. I peek my head out of my living room window. It's my dad's car. I'm just thinking, no biggie. He likes to drop by from time to time. I honestly can't remember the type of car now, but I know it had power-assisted steering and it was a diesel. My back door was unlocked since I was in. I hear him come inside, shouting my name. I'm a little bit startled by that. I know I hadn't pissed him off recently, so I don't know why he was so angry. I immediately noticed that his wrists are caked in crimson red. There are about 6 slash marks on each wrist. He comes to me and he says, "Anon, I've made a terrible mistake." Those fucking words still haunt me to this day. Now, just for imagery now, there is a 6-foot, 40-year-old man, wrists caked in blood, on the verge of tears, dripping blood onto my cream carpet. I panic a little bit, but I manage to stay on top of it. I run to the phone and call the police, and go to the kitchen and grab my emergency first aid kit and give it to him. Since I'm actually clueless as to what to do and still in a bit of shock, I leave it up to himself to sort himself out, just while emergency services arrive. Due to the nature of where I live, it took them around 20 minutes just to arrive. Right, with that out of the way, here comes the spooky part again. After the event, I talked to my dad about it. At first, he was hesitant and ashamed, but I managed to get him to talk. First, while driving the car to where he went to perform the act, he managed to damage it so that the power steering would not work. I found out that after he sent it in for a checkup, since it was quite visible it was damaged from just looking. While actually in the act of cutting himself, he noticed the exact same figure I had seen at the nature reserve. He described him exactly how I saw him, except that whatever it was had a grin on its face, and watched him do it. After my dad had been carted into the back of the ambulance and taken to the hospital, it appeared one last time. So when the last one happened, I was walking back from my garden gate to my home's back door. I used that as my main entrance instead of the front door. I have never known why. Looking straight down, you can see a bit around the corner to my garden, and the garden shed is just at a head down the path. It's just standing in front of the shed. It stares me down just like it did before. I feel that intense anxiety and panic just like before. I do not close my eyes this time, and I just try to man up. Instead of a grin or a blank expression, he just looks at me with a disappointing look, like he was disappointed that my dad had not managed to take his own life. Then it walks silently off to the left into my garden and then out of view. I bolt into my house and into my kitchen and look out of the window in there. There was no sign of him again. I went to the door and I locked it. I closed my blinds and curtains around the windows of the house. I just sit there by the phone, waiting for a call from the hospital. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I think, I am a bit of a skeptic about this sort of stuff, but the fact that this thing was appearing in broad daylight caused me to become more of a believer in paranormal stuff. I did some research into it afterwards, and all I found out that it was some kind of an omen, and that it feeds on negative events going on. From what I deduced, it knew what was going on with my dad and was ready for a feast of energy, but something else that day was looking over my dad as a man with slit wrists managed to drive a damaged, now non-power assisted car all the way to my house without dying on the way there, which is a miracle in itself. So yeah, that's about it.